as I see people filtering in, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Channel Islands Restoration Environmental Experts webinar series. This is the second year that we've been doing this series, and it's been pretty popular with folks, and we have enjoyed it and had a lot of really neat experiences. As you can see here, we got another neat presentation coming up, this time by Island Conservation. So I'll take a moment to remind everyone that Channel Islands Restoration is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We do habitat restoration contracting, so we'll go and fix up landscapes in all kinds of different areas, although our name implies that we work on the Channel Islands, and indeed we do, and that's where we got our start. We also work in many places in Santa Barbara, Ventura, and even down into Los Angeles County. We also do environmental consulting and, of course, environmental education, which is what we're doing right now. Question that we get all the time is, where can I find this webinar later on? Those are usually from people who have arrived late and missed the first part about it. So you can do that on our website, cirweb.org, cirweb.org/webinars. Give us a few days to put this one up. But you can see not just this one, but lots and lots of previous webinars. And also we're live on Facebook and on YouTube right now. But yeah, a wealth of information in there, a lot of really neat things that we've shown folks over the last couple of years. A lot of really good educational material from some pretty amazing folks. So there, we're live streaming, good. And yes, cirweb.org/webinars. Let's see. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge that we all live in this amazing area, which is unceded Chumash territory, the homeland of the Chumash people. What an incredible, amazing area we are privileged to live in. But it was taken, it wasn't given to us, but we get to enjoy it at the moment. And we thank so much our Chumash partners that we work with as well. So let me close that out and find my cheat sheet here. Give me a second and I will introduce our guest. Lots of things open on the computer, so 1 second. There we go. Tonight, we are privileged to be hearing from Chad Hansen of Island Conservation. He's now serving as Island Conservation's Deputy Vice President, and he's implemented a suite of island restoration projects over the last 20 years with a focus on addressing one of the most impactful threats, introduced invasive species. Now, all of us here in the Santa Barbara, Ventura, LA area know about that, I think. All of us know about that, right? Certainly people who are on our webinars and know about work that's happened on the California Channel Islands. Island Conservation works internationally, so that's what's going to be maybe particularly interesting about that. But they have worked on our islands, and we'll be hearing about that, I would imagine, plus other places. Chad, having worked with over a dozen of the most damaging vertebrate species, he has extensive experience in assessing feasibility, project planning and budgeting, biosecurity, innovative tools and methodologies, and implementing eradications. We were just talking about drones a moment ago, but I don't think you're going to go into that tonight, Chad, but that could be a webinar in itself. His mission is to prevent extinctions, which is an ongoing through rewilding. And I love that term. That's coming out more and more. I hear that rewilding. It's such a neat term of some of our most at-risk islands. And I'm just going to jump in here. You know, most extinctions have happened in islands. He's going to probably tell us that, but they are so vulnerable. So it is so important to have folks like this, and us for that matter, working out on these islands. Before joining island conservation, Chad played a prominent role in the world's largest goat removal, which was on Santiago Island in the Galapagos, applying his management and training skills to a team of over 40 Ecuadorian field staff. He co-chairs Island Conservation's eradication advisory team, reviewing and advising on projects globally, and has led the development of Island Conservation's internal project management process. With that, I'll turn it over to Chad Hansen. Welcome, Chad.
Good evening, and hello to everybody out in the digital land. I know this is a Zoom now, so it could be a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Hopefully you're tucked in and have a glass of wine, a cup of tea, or at the very least have your feet kicked up and are ready for a presentation I've been looking forward to giving tonight. So with that said, I'll get kicked off, and it's great to have a co-conspirator here with Ken, knowing so much about island restoration. It's wonderful. Let me see if I can share this. How does that look on your end over there?
Excellent. Looks great.
Perfect. So you know who I am. You know a little bit about the role that I do and island conservation. So we're as well a 5013C nonprofit NGO. So again, thanks for everyone for coming tonight. Also, thanks to our host, Channel Islands Restoration, for putting on this event, which is exciting. And I'll get right into it. So eradications have been something that's been a part of me and Channel Islands. In fact, it reminds me when I spent about 2 years removing feral cats from San Nick. And so this is neat to have this audience. And I'm drawn to our organization because the mission's clear. It's also laser focused. We prevent extinctions on islands by removing invasive species. But
Hey,
that's,
Chad,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I left out a really important salient detail. Guys, we'd love to have your questions. Very sorry to interrupt you. But what we'd like you to do, if you're used to our process, type them into the question and answer section of the webinar, and we will go through, and if we know the answers, we'll answer them right away for you. But otherwise, we'll save them up all toward the end, and we'll be able to ask them then. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, well, with a 4-hour presentation, I really should be able to cover everything comprehensively. So hopefully we're good. But yeah, no, I'm joking. This will be fun. But so yeah, we remove invasive species, but that's really where the work begins. So we unite with island communities, dedicated partners in the pursuit of holistic restorations. They really look to restore and rewild, like we were mentioning, islands across the globe. And tonight, I hope to explain why we think that's important, as well as share a few stories that are from the field, which I personally have found pretty inspiring. And so when I mention islands, what comes to mind? Is it dreams, or if you're lucky enough, maybe some memories of a tropical beach vacation? Are you imagining crystal waters or vibrant colors? Maybe the sound of the breeze or the surf? Or maybe it's where you're convinced that perfect wave lives, so it's all you're thinking about. And yes, that is an addiction, and you know who you are out there. It could be a vision of an enchanted storybook hideout where pirates buried their secrets. So there are actually stories about this island here. It's one of our project sites in the Caribbean. And I will admit, though, if there is treasure, it's really well hidden. And what you may not know is that islands also represent some of the greatest concentrations of animal and plant life. So a fifth of our world's biodiversity. But they're also where the most species extinctions have occurred. So island species, they're unique, and many are found nowhere else on Earth but that one spot. They're also highly vulnerable to change and disturbances. So like non-native, damaging, invasive species, which are implicated in nearly 90% of all recorded extinctions on islands. That's a lot. And we've also found that over 40% of critically endangered and endangered vertebrates, so those right on the brink of extinction, are on islands, like this little Juan Fernandez firecrown hummingbird, which is an amazing picture to finally get one of those standing still. And synonymous with those islands are coral reefs, which are found in the surrounding waters. They make up about 0.5% of the Earth's surface, yet host a quarter of all marine life. In fact, over a third of people globally rely on food from our oceans. And islands represent 11% of our global population, 22% of our world's nations, and 27% of all languages. So that might not seem like a lot, but remember, islands are only about 5% of the Earth's landmass. And now our world's plants and animals, you, me, our fellow communities, they're on the front lines of three major global crises. So failing ocean health, mass extinction of biodiversity, and climate change. It's like what you see here, coral reefs are not supposed to be white. Like that's a scary sight right there. And because of soil erosion, flooding, rising sea levels, destructive invasive species, it's island communities in particular that are disproportionately impacted. So their ecosystems are vulnerable, their livelihoods are at risk. When trying to mitigate these environmental threats, Western conservation efforts tend to focus on separate areas of expertise. So one group specializes in preserving terrestrial flora and fauna. Second group, preserving marine life. And all too often, these conservation groups, they don't interact or poorly interact or share their knowledge or understand how the work is connected. They're focused and highly specialized, but also separated and artificially siloed. And I'm even guilty of that, as you heard what I do in my introduction and what our mission's been. And this approach, it's a disservice to vulnerable island communities, their diverse challenges and needs. And Western conservationists are failing to recognize and amplify the collective wisdom that's been gathered by islanders over multiple generations. And so we have to remember that indigenous and local people live on islands, they raise their family on islands, make a living there, pass along cultural practices on islands. And they understand that these ecosystems and the systems all throughout, they depend on them like no one else. So how can we better support them and our collective understanding of how to address these shared challenges? We can start by listening, and we can definitely start by learning. So indigenous island people have long recognized and lived their lives within the interconnections among islands and oceans. They embrace holistic solutions that span land, sea, and community, which is a philosophy that is woven into the fabric of their culture. And there's a Palauan proverb that highlights this point. And if you've ever been to Palau, you are experiencing land and sea virtually everywhere you go. It's a nation comprised of hundreds of islands, and I'll have a chance later to give you a sense of what that's like. And islanders, they've known for centuries what happens on land happens at sea. So Western conservation is only just catching up to this idea. The emerging science, which we dove into while my colleagues prepared an article for the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which demonstrates these links. It highlights that carefully chosen conservation actions on an island can lead to stunning changes in multiple neighboring ecosystems. So as we're learning, everything is connected. So how does that work? So there's certain native wildlife species that live at the land-sea interface. They include sea turtles, land crabs, seabirds, seals, and a number of others. So we call them connector species. Vital engineers of healthy linked ecosystems. So like the wrasse, which consumes coral, passes the substrate, becomes sand, and this sand becomes a beach that supports crab burrows. That crab will go out and it'll pull nutrient-rich material to the shore, which supports healthy Pisonia trees, which is a favorite for seabird nesting. And the birds then feed on fish and squid out on the ocean, come back, and they leave guano behind that then fertilizes and supports a healthy growing reef, also known as a delicious buffet to that wrasse. And then that cycle continues. So seabirds especially are one of the best examples of a connector species. As I hinted before, these birds excrete or jettison, as you can see here, key nutrients, so nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, to fertilize native plants on land, creating essential nutrient flow into the ocean, which in turn nourishes virtually all life forms at sea. So these nutrients are powerful contributors to what we call the island ocean ecosystem. So, for example, in the Chagos archipelago, which is in the central Indian Ocean, researchers have found that islands with more seabirds had up to 250 times more nutrients deposited through seabird guano. And these nutrients, they create thriving native plant life that's foundational for island wildlife and landscapes, bolstering climate change resilience and protecting islands and their people. So in these same islands, research showed 50% more fish when compared to other islands with fewer seabirds. And that's crucial for marine wildlife, providing a variety of food sources for other connector species. Thriving marine life is also vital for sustainable local economies and livelihoods for island communities, right? You're surrounded by that ocean and what it has to offer. And in Fiji, a study showed that corals grew 4 times faster in lagoons next to islands with abundant seabirds and lots of nutrients. That's compared to islands with few seabirds and scarce nutrients, which were part of a control study. So coral reefs are one of the most important places on Earth. In addition to the marine life they support, corals, along with mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes, can be excellent absorbers of carbon. So as we seek to mitigate climate change, you've heard of carbon sequestration. It's a big part of that. And so remember our connector species, these guys and more? Here's the problem. So these animals are under constant threat. Invasive species alone can destroy delicate landscapes, devastate island plant and animal life. So too often leading to the complete extinction of these unique island species. So without connector species, right, these islands, they can turn into stark, lifeless environments. So an entire island ocean ecosystem can collapse. So it's an interconnected problem that demands an interconnected solution. So what can we do? Well, the Island Ocean Connection Challenge is a holistic approach to all of these threats. So island conservation, Rewild, and the Scripps Institute of Oceanography launched the challenge early in 2002. So our ambitious and achievable goal is to restore at least 40 globally significant island ecosystems from ridge to reef by 2030. And so these tailored projects around the world, they each look a little different. So amid a broad partnership, we'll work together to remove invasive species and recover endangered seabirds, as well as replant mangroves and seagrass beds. We'll prevent erosion, minimize sedimentation, and replant native trees. So we'll restore native wildlife and plants and expand marine protected areas to ensure that future generations can thrive. So these focused interventions that are tailored to the specific needs of the island ocean ecosystem and their communities can really multiply our return on investment. So a great example of an intervention happened here on Palmyra Atoll, which is in the Pacific, in the Northern Line Islands. It's an incredible place. So rats were present, which predated on, which I mentioned earlier, Pisonia seeds and seabirds. And really, if you know rats, practically anything they can wrap their incisors around, right? They are a serious predator. And so seen here, coconut trees became a dominant species as they could regenerate basically in the presence of rats. So sadly, seabirds are unable to nest in the palms and thriving colonies began to disappear, as did the marine species, which relied on that nutrient runoff, which I was describing earlier. So the removal of rats was conducted, and knowing just how damaging this invasive species was to this fragile environment. And once they were gone, seeds lasted long enough on the ground to germinate. The atoll began to return to its natural state, and the once elusive Pisonia made a remarkable return, like you can see here with one of my colleagues, Coral Wolf, basking in the shade of a new forest canopy. Pretty incredible. And this meant that the habitat was recovering for important connector species like this little nestling here. And here we have Choros Island. It's just south of the Atacama Desert in Chile. It's home to these guys, the threatened Humboldt penguin. And the problem was that rabbits had been introduced in the early 20th century as a food source in the event that fishermen became stranded. And rabbits, well, they breed well like rabbits, and there were a lot of them. So the result was bare soil, stark rock outcroppings, and dying clumps of cactus, like you can see here, which the penguins held on to as their last remaining refuge to nest and raise their chicks. The solution was clear. The environment could not be restored until rabbits were removed. So Island Conservation partnered with the Chilean government and local partners to make that happen. And after their removal, the changes really began to happen rapidly. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and this picture was taken relatively shortly after the project was completed. So native vegetation, no longer suppressed by rabbits, it painted the landscape, and we still continue to monitor benefits as the ecosystem heals over time, which is something we have teams visiting and look forward to hearing what stories come out of that as time goes on. In Chañaral, the sister island of Choros is just a few miles north, and this island tells a little bit different story. So it was once home to the largest breeding colony of Peruvian diving petrels. It had rabbits also, but also had foxes, which were released to control the rabbits. You've heard of biocontrol. So between the fox predation and competing with rabbits for habitat, there wasn't a single burrow that remained. Fortunately, a few colonies survived on Choros, which we were just talking about, yet the larger historic stronghold was on Chañaral, was a ghost town. So foxes were no longer present, fortunately, but like Choros, rabbits needed to go. before the restoration could begin. And so these two projects were conducted together. And here's a picture of what an active colony looks like. This one's on Choros. Each one of those little holes would have a nesting Peruvian diving petrel. And this one and others like it on the island are expanding, which is really exciting. So sitting there, you can listen to the symphony of sounds and the little grunts coming from the residents, who are these little guys, which are known locally as yuncos. Meanwhile, though, on Chañaral, so even though the foxes and the rabbits are gone, you could only hear the sound of our field team. It's hard at work in this photo here. So the symphony of birds, that left long ago. And it's crazy to think you couldn't have walked through this area previously without twisting an ankle. So that substrate you can see behind the team here is just solid. It meant, though, that we had one more step to kickstart the restoration here. In fact, it was the perfect opportunity for social attraction. With artificial burrows in place and a sound system playing calls, we began an unprecedented effort to attract the species with what we had is high hopes of success. The prospecting of our site, it began immediately. So that means birds looking for new places. And our burrows that found tenants. And new, genuine burrows, not what you're seeing here, which are people digging in tubes, began to show up. And so it may not seem like much, but that is the fluff and the breath of the first Peruvian diving petrel recorded on Chañaral in 40 years. So the result of our efforts on Chañaral and Choros provides increased safeguards for Humboldt penguins, as well as contributed to the downlisting of the Peruvian diving petrel from endangered to near threatened. So in our eyes, that is working to prevent extinctions. Now, if we lost these species, I can only imagine the cascade of impacts to the islands, to the marine environment, as well as the communities that rely on them. And moving over to a place just a little bit greener, you can find Palau, which is in the Southwest Pacific Ocean. Some of you may recognize the name if you're into diving, as there's several world-class sites to experience there, like German Channel. It was also part of the Pacific Theater of War, so Angar and Peleliu, for example. And remnants of World War II are found throughout the country, while various occupations have had a lasting impact on the land and its people. Like I was saying, in Palau, you've got these islands strung out everywhere. And there's an island called Ulang, which is nested in the Rock Islands, which are a complex of hundreds of islands. They look like they're floating on pedestals. So the place is magical, making it easy to understand why it's made it on the UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites. And hidden below the water is a kaleidoscope of color made up of corals, anemones, fish, and a whole lot more. You're talking sea snakes, sea turtles. It's incredible. And finally, tune ecosystems, some which science has yet to fully understand or even document and describe. You know, one of those unique ecosystems you can see here with a prominent resident, a stingless jellyfish. So they chase the sun throughout the day, feeding a symbiotic algae that lives within them. And you won't find them in the ocean, though. Right? These are within landlocked marine lakes, which are hidden throughout the Rock Islands. And it's a surreal experience to swim amongst thousands of sunlit jellies as they sit and silently pulse, suspended in an oxygenated top layer. And meanwhile, about 15 meters below, the water layer changes and turns toxic with high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide, which can be absorbed through your skin if you were to dive down. So then there's also a thin layer of bacteria that at that break, and they consume the remaining sunlight that shines through, just leaving this dark abyss below with your imagination to wrestle with while you sit and catch your next breath while you're swimming on top. It's an experience. And within the forests on Oolong and along the coast, you've got crabs like this cute little guy that shaped the environment, including the coconut crab, which is seen here. So this photo, though, is actually from Palmyra, because it can be quite challenging to find specimens on Oolong in the presence of invasive species. And although incredibly powerful as an adult, they're capable of shredding a coconut or taking off a finger even. Introduced invasive predators, they can easily prey on the more vulnerable life cycle stages of the crabs as they develop into adults. So we often get asked, how something so small as a rat or a mouse can have such an impact. Take, for example, the sea turtles here. They're massive animals capable of enduring so much at sea and returning to picturesque beaches to nest. Yet, in short order, see if that'll play well for us. Let me try and restart that. There it goes. It's a hard one to watch twice. Everything that they've worked for and everything they work to accomplish can be taken away just like that. So this has big implications on biological diversity, particularly when species haven't evolved in the presence of that type of predator. On highlighting Palau's diversity, seen here transitioning between trees and across the lagoons, is the vulnerable fruit bat or flying fox, as you might recognize. So they're a sight to see. So the size catches your eye as if a vulture is gliding by you. Then you realize it's a giant bat and it's in the middle of the day. As well, unique birds like kingfishers, who rely on healthy fish populations, and bristlethied curlews, which are searching for invertebrates in the seashore sand, and threatened megapodes. They can also be seen, and if you're lucky, you can also witness the rare ground dove and a laundry list of other exceptional birds. If you're a birder, this is a place to definitely consider. Oolong, though, however, is under the threat of invasive rodents and feral cats. Predation has impacted land birds, crabs, it's decimated seabird densities, which disrupts the natural balance. And we're actively surveying the land and the nearshore environment in an attempt to better document and understand how interventions that we are capable of implementing now can restore balance to the land and sea, and preserve the cultural practices of communities who have developed in concert with a thriving natural ecosystem. So my last example is one that is near and dear to me, which is Floriana Island. It's in the Galapagos Islands off of Ecuador. So I began my career here in the Galapagos Islands 20 years ago, like you heard earlier, and feel incredibly fortunate to have a part in the archipelago's continued restoration. So now I can't begin telling the story of Floriana, though, without mentioning the journey, though, to get there. Because at over 17,000 hectares, or in other words, nearly 43,000 acres, and inhabited, it would be one of the largest and the most complicated cat, rat, and mouse eradications contemplated to date. And contemplated for good reason. Now, 54 threatened species would be safeguarded, and 12 unique animals, which are no longer present on the island, like this namesake Floriana mockingbird, could be reintroduced. The community as well would become a key partner. They're helping with this, and they've helped build a vision to restore their home, their livelihoods, and their future. So we knew what needed to happen. And it began all with a look of determination. And we definitely had it with our partners and with the community. And so we started off small, demonstrating the success of the tools and the methodology, building the teams and the expertise necessary, and innovating new methods and technologies where precedent just did not exist. Right? This is a developing industry. And so rather than theorize, we implemented. We did project after project in order to prepare for Floriana. And well over a dozen projects later, we're ready and also have some incredible results to share from that journey. So one of the islands leading up to Floriana was Pinzon. So here, now rodent-free, this endemic giant tortoise no longer required head starting to persist on the island. So the island now had hatchlings survive in the wild for the first time in 150 years. On another island, Rabida, we came across this little individual. And even better than bundling insurance, they made the announcement that their species, which is previously known from subfossil records only, hadn't gone extinct. No longer suppressed by rats, they reappeared almost immediately. The impacts are wide, and so you never know what other surprises might exist. And for those invertebrates lovers out there, we discovered a new species of snail. And yes, I have celebrated wildly over a snail. This is proof of it. And as the post-eradication monitoring continues, only time will tell what happens as the islands grow wilder, like the reintroductions that we're participating in, and closer to how travelers' journals, like that of Charles Darwin, once described. So case in point, the last known record of this land iguana on Santiago Island was from Darwin himself. So we changed this by translocating over 2,000 individuals from another project site, which we also freed from invasive rodents, so Norway rats and black rats. So home at last, they can reconnect with their place in a dynamic ecosystem where they belong. And these results are exciting. You know, we embark on this mission with the Floriana community and a dedicated partnership to implement this ambitious project. So it's set to finally happen this year after 11 years of planning and preparation. And you can ask my family, I've been talking about this one for a very long time. And we're looking forward to opening the doors to bringing species back like the Floriana giant tortoise, the transformative element of the ecosystem, which supports things like seed distribution for a Puntia cactus, which has really struggled in their absence as they move seeds up the hill and rodents continue to chew these cactus for water, and they're toppling over with need of all the help they can get before they're gone as well. As well, animals like the Galapagos petrel, they can expand in range, begin nesting in historic sites, offering resilience to a critically endangered species literally on the brink of extinction. You can count how many there are. So their presence provides a conduit to the ocean's nutrients, which support the healthy forests and habitat for native birds like the medium tree finch here. Yet another critically endangered species, which is about to vanish if no action is taken. So work on islands like Floriana, coupled with an ongoing effort to expand and actively protect the Galapagos Marine Reserve, it offers hope for the incredible island-ocean connection that supports so much in the region. And similar to so many other opportunities around the globe, these plants and animals, they can thrive. And these efforts will have a lasting impact on generations to come. And these were just a few examples of what can be done to combat biodiversity extinction. So demonstrating how proactive action can offer resilience to climate change, and how recognizing the interconnectedness between islands and oceans can even aid in turning the tide on our ocean's health. And it's easier than you think to be a part of the effort. So whether it's simply sharing these stories that you heard tonight, getting boots on the ground and getting your hands dirty, to supporting the cause through a donation or even an introduction to an interested party, like literally every little bit makes a difference, and we're in this one together. So thank you for joining me tonight and for your interest in this important topic. So it was a pleasure for me to put this presentation together for everyone here. And just think, you could be a part of the next story that's shared of hope. And odds are there is work to be done in a place that's pretty close to your heart. I can almost guarantee it. And so a shout to a growing body of partners and supporters who believe in the island-ocean connection is here. So an incredible group of people and supporters and donors as well. So again, thank you. Here's a couple QR codes if you want to learn more. And with that, I'll hand it back over and look forward to whatever questions you guys have for me.
Okay, really great, Chad. Yeah, folks, I have a few questions saved up. There's still a couple in open, and I'll get to those in just a second. So yeah, keep them coming.
Hopefully I didn't scare everyone off.
Yeah.
That wasn't too long, was it?
Yeah, good. So Robin Burney started off, and Robin has worked forever, it would seem, for us as a volunteer. She spent a huge amount of time working on San Nicolas Island, growing and planting native plants. Mostly she was part of the growing part, but we got everybody involved with the planting. So she's asked if you could tell the audience a little bit about the cat eradication that happened out on San Nicolas.
Sure. No, absolutely. So the cat eradication happened between 2009 and 2011, and the planning started prior to that. Funding came from a settlement related to DDT and some other chemicals, which went through the Montrose Settlement Fund. And it came to the partners, so being a U.S. Navy base, also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And the funding was really about protecting shorebirds, seabirds, and habitat restoration. And one of the key threats to that was feral cats that had been introduced long before they came with the ranchers that were on the island. And we took a look at that project and realized, hey, we think this is feasible. So a key thing for maybe some of the viewers who might not know, there's an island fox, which shares really similar characteristics as an animal, but much different in how it can compete, so on and so forth. So we went and we did a number of trials. One was to demonstrate that we could trap cats while mitigating any potential impact to foxes, because there was some doubt whether or not we could do that. And things like the use of chemicals or any other removal technique was not allowed. And so we modified specialized padded leg hold traps with a bunch of unique components to make them low impact. We also partnered with the Institute of Wildlife Studies, who brought in a mobile veterinary clinic in case we did have any potential injuries, because those foxes can be really quite fragile. And as we are getting closer and closer to implementation, there's quite a lot of public feedback and commentary about how are you removing those animals. And in many cases, because of cost and animal ethics, lethal removal is typically the way forward. But in this unique scenario, we were able to partner with the Humane Society of the US to take those islands those cats after they were captured live off to a sanctuary and do predominantly live removal over the span of those 2 years. And that trapping lasted about 6 months. And we implemented a number of neat innovations like a trap monitoring system, which would send a signal from a trap going off to a satellite down to a custom built interface that our team programmed. And we could limit our responses down to about 45 minutes to get out and check those traps to be as humane as we possibly could be. And modeling helped us understand when we were done, and we wrapped that project up with a 99.9997% confidence that we were done. And we walked away from that island being cat-free, which was pretty exciting. And so that's got your snowy plovers and the island night lizard, which has since been removed from the endangered species list. And so a lot of really, really outstanding outcomes from that work.
Yeah, it sure was. And of course, CIR was really proud to plant more than 35,000 plants, collect the seed, grow out the plants, build the nursery to grow out the plants, put them all in the ground. And so, yeah, folks like Robin really, really helped with that. Thank you so much. Aledia says, I think she was talking about the Oolong Island and the chick that you showed, and I missed which one that was, but she says, wow, congratulations. How long was the project ongoing before the first chick appeared?
The social attraction, so we wrapped that project up in 2017, if I recall correctly. And we started social attraction. It went for 1 year. And also it's challenging to get back out because of conditions. There's also some nuance and stories about weather destroying a dock. But it was the second year. Prospecting began to happen almost immediately, where we were seeing little footprints in the sand and in the dust. And it's been this following year where we've seen new tunnels, and with our burrow cams, we're able to capture that video of that little chick. And that was on Chenyarab.
Excellent. That's amazing.
Yep. And so we're kicking off a few other projects really similar to that elsewhere to try and bolster those populations, which is exciting. And in that one, we had to develop some of the techniques, because a lot of this has to be pioneered from the ground up where other researchers haven't yet began. So it's an exciting area.
Speaking of which, another longtime volunteer, speaking of techniques, Kathy Crowther wants to know how, I'm adding this, how in the heck do you get rid of rats and rabbits and cows? She says, wow, seems, cows, I meant cats. Wow, seems impossible.
It does, and it's no easy feat. It's been methodologies and tools that have been developing for decades now. There's been hundreds, over 700, I think even getting closer to 1,000, I want to say, rodent eradications now around the world. And we do it by starting off with some criteria of all things. And so we have to ask ourselves, can we access every single rodent home range on an island? Can we remove them faster than they can reproduce, which, as you can imagine, rodents can reproduce rather quickly? Can we prevent them from coming back to the island? So for us, we do this work on islands because we can protect that investment, and we can put in safeguards, which we describe as biosecurity. And the last one is can the impact that we have, if there's anything negative to do with that, be outweighed by the positive recovery and the restoration? And so in the topic of rodents, we've looked at a number of different ways to do it. And what we've had to settle on for the time being is a specialized rodent bait that we've developed with certain colors and types and a certain chemical that we can put on that island for a short period of time and remove that population as quickly as possible, where we can have that rodenticide go and be accessed by them. And so it's not as easy as that sounds, because we start by looking at the native species and the food chains and making sure that any potential negative impacts there can be mitigated for and are considered acceptable in the light of that last eradication criteria that I mentioned. And then we spend quite a lot of time planning to make sure we get it just right, because we don't want to do it again. We want these interventions to be as quick and as short as possible. And then we monitor, in your words, we monitor the heck out of it. And once basically 2 breeding periods go by and we have all these detection devices that we can incorporate, we'll usually feel confident walking away knowing how we did.
Great. Erica asks a 2-part question. Aside from food for stranded sailors, as an example,
Mhm.
or to eradicate already introduced invasive species, are there other reasons invasive species are introduced, such as rats? Then I can say, that was often accidental, like with the sinking of the Winfield Scott and Anacapa brought us the
Yep.
rats. The second part of her question: are invasive species always introduced by humans, or are there other ways this happens?
Yeah, no, great question. So accidental introduction happens, like you mentioned. If it's a shipwreck, sometimes just people who are out visiting islands for their beauty may have a stowaway that can make their way. A cat has jumped off of sailboats, for example. So those accidental ones are a part of the program there. There's also a crazy story on Clipperton Atoll where the lighthouse keeper brought a cat to help manage the rodents. One single cat, and that cat decimated the seabird population. It's a famous story, but that was an intentional introduction that had a catastrophic impact. And other cases of intentional introductions, like I mentioned with the fox, or you've probably heard of cane toads. You could think of mongoose. Mongoose are introduced in many cases to help manage rats in cane fields, but one's nocturnal, the other's diurnal. They don't really get along at the same time. So some of these plans backfire and you end up having 2 really disastrous introduced invasive species that end up being there. And what was the second question, Ken?
Well, are they always I eliminated it, but it was are they always introduced by people deliberately, or are they also accidentally introduced? And I think you've already
Gotcha.
answered.
Yeah. So I think we've got that one covered. Yeah, it can happen in a multitude of ways. Other ones are storm blown, or if you have material that is moving between islands, sometimes rats can get on those. Another big one that a lot of people forget and ignore are invertebrates, ants, some of these other species that can stow away in cardboard, for example. You ever think about corrugation? It's one of the worst. And so things like putting stuff in a freezer before you go to another part of an island or out to an island can be a really important part of biosecurity that's effective against those types. And then seeds, they stick to everything. You guys know.
Yeah, right. So when you get to the campground and you open up your tent and you go, oh my God, I forgot about all this. I never got a chance to clean it. Let me air it out and shake it out, and all the seeds go flying.
Oh,
and,
you're giving me chills. That's like the worst. Yeah, no, try to go through that stuff. This is my one public, service announcement. Try to go through that stuff before you get on the boat or the airplane or swim to wherever you're planning on visiting.
And the seeds in your laces, of your boots, they're often, seeds are often just adapted to be dispersed by animals. So we pick them up just like any other animal and move them around.
Yeah.
I should note that in the California Channel Islands, even though there's multiple jurisdictions, you got federal government, you got the Nature Conservancy, and there's a biosecurity group that meets regularly, and Channel Islands Restoration is part of that. And so that group meets quarterly to look at issues related to introductions. And whenever there's a stranding of a boat, or even when the Conception unfortunately caught fire off the coast of Santa Cruz Island, the first thing that this group does is move really quickly to get ashore near this boat to find out if the rats left the ship and went
So
ashore, because as much as island conservation and all of us are really, really, really good at what they do, if you got an infestation on Santa Cruz Island and it was allowed to spread, if these rats were allowed to get really, really loose out of, say, maybe just a small harbor or something, at some point you wouldn't be able to get rid of them. So.
yeah, and I mean, here's a secret: if we can work ourselves out of a job and don't have to remove damaging invasive species, I'll be the first one to celebrate.
Yeah, me too.
But like the biosecurity you're talking about, it's not just that prevention element. You know, that's the cheapest. The work we do can be quite expensive, unfortunately, because of the remote locations and the equipment that you need and the planning and the staff. But there's the prevention, and then there's early detection, which is what you're describing, which is an amazing part of a really well thought out comprehensive biosecurity program. And then there's rapid response. So having those three components can serve as the foundation of a pretty effective biosecurity program if you have those in place and you're ready to act.
And I'm trying to remember, but yeah, I think it was in Avalon recently, a raccoon got loose that came in on a boat. So and they got it, but you know, you really hope that raccoon is just one or not a female.
Absolutely. There are projects out there that have incredible biodiversity where raccoons in the Caribbean are presenting a real serious challenge.
Wow. Okay, Anonymous asks, do you work to eliminate plants too? Can you give us some examples?
Yes, we do. And you know, even go a little bit deeper. So also when we invasive weeds, I guess that's where we can start. They can be just as damaging and impactful. They can push out native species, which, you know, other animals rely on. But we'll put in exclusion plots to see what actually is going to come back if you remove an herbivore like feral goats or rabbits. And we've got an ongoing project right now on Selkirk Island and Robinson Crusoe and the Juan Fernandez Islands off of Chile, where the Franklinia Foundation is supporting invasive weed removal and plant removal to help restore and bring back the endemic plants that are there. So like the Juan Fernandez Islands, as far as endemism and biodiversity, give the Galapagos Islands a major run for their money. And a lot of people don't think about that. But plants are a critical part of that. In other cases, plants can disrupt iguana breeding habitat. Like there's another project of ours in the Caribbean, Mona Island, where iguanas need this loose substrate so they can dig their burrows, they can lay their eggs. But when it ends up being strewn through with casuarina or ironwood forests and other plants, they just simply lose that habitat that is the only habitat for them to reproduce. So you might have adult iguanas that are present and you think, oh, this population's great. But you have no recruitment any longer, and it's like the living dead. That population is going to vanish. So there's a couple examples there, and the list goes on. Just like invasive vertebrate removal, invasive plant removal is really an important part of that holistic restoration process.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, CIR specializes in that. We don't do vertebrate or invertebrate removal. We just
give us a call.
We leave that to you guys. Absolutely. Let's see. Shannon asks, can you use volunteers? Have you done like that international volunteer vacation kind of thing? And or are they just local volunteers? You must use volunteers from time to time.
Funny you ask. Yeah. So if you're interested in something like that, a really neat example was one we partnered with Lenovo, so the tech company. And if you Google another tech company, Work for Humankind on Robinson Crusoe, you'll see an amazing program there where we brought in volunteers and experts from around the world to help bolster and engage with the community. And in other cases, we'll work where we'll need field hands to come and help support, or if there's a certain expertise that you have, and you're like, hey, you know what, I think this would be great really to apply in some of the work that you do, don't hesitate to reach out. It's been a goal to try and also think about how we could develop a more robust program like that. I think one of the hardest parts is just kind of managing the flow and the influx, because many of these places are ultra challenging to get to and quite expensive as well. So striking that balance. But yeah, no, having volunteers and building more ambassadors for the work that we do is a win-win.
Great, that's neat. I'm glad you asked that question so that we could get that answer. That's interesting. So I got like 6 more questions right now, but we have a few minutes. So if you want to enter some more in the Q&A, feel free. First off, Brett Hansen said, "Hi, Chad." Sounds like you must know him.
Sounds like I have some family on.
He also then followed up with a question. "I understand there are many ways to remove species and that a lot of research goes into methodology. What techniques do you consider when determining the most appropriate approach without affecting other wildlife or existing habitat? Wonderful work you all do. Longtime fan."
I'll have to remember to send him a check in the mail for that. No, yeah, no, that's a great question. So when we initially look at feasibility and what methods we use, one of them is we start by looking at precedent. What else has been done around the world? And so if there's precedent like on rodent eradications, we can tie into that base of knowledge. We have some great databases that are linked on our website, which you can access to see all the work that's been done and some of the great opportunities on islands. But as well, we use that, and then we can start to dig into native species and which have a potential exposure to whatever method you're using. If it's trapping, will they land in a trap? If it's, the specialized rodent bait that I was describing, do they have a pathway to exposure? And if they did, are they at risk if they consume that? Like a crab, for example, can consume as much as they want because the methodology of how it works doesn't impact their processing. And so that's one way to do it. Another way is when we're looking at novel species. And, I really love this about island conservation, because people come with really novel threats that they find on their islands. And they're like, "Hey, we need your help. Have you ever dealt with this species?" Like, no, we haven't. We can't find any literature about that either. But you know what? We'll sit down and we have an incredible body of experience, both in-house. Our teams are all over the world. And we have an even larger network of experts globally that were routinely, they're toxicologists, they're behavior experts, you name it. And so we work with them to find what methods exist. And then we go through those individually and identify which one is likely to be successful or which package of them. And in certain cases, there's regulatory pieces we have to consider that'll either say this is the only one you can use, or you cannot use this for the life of you. So things like that, I always equate putting these projects together like turning a puzzle box and dumping it on the table. There's an answer in there. You just need to take the time to put the pieces together in the right image to get it done. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Brett. If not, give me a call.
Another anonymous, or who knows, maybe it's the same anonymous, wants to know what work are you doing in Panama?
Ooh, in Panama. So Panama is a really neat partner country that is signed on to the Island Ocean Connection Challenge. And we're right now working with the Panamanian government to identify what islands that they have currently in their suite with challenges that we can help support. So the work right now is actually assessing feasibility and building a portfolio of projects with them to help prevent extinctions, to help holistically restore these islands. And time will tell. We're pretty excited. And to date, we've looked at a few and participated in a few, like with Cueva Island as an example, which is unbelievable if you've ever had a chance to look it up. There's endemic howler monkeys, and I'm excited to get back because I can only imagine what species that can be seen deep in that forest that science hasn't even described yet.
Great. Let's see what else I have here. All the work you do sounds really cool. Does island conservation hire paid positions, or it is primarily volunteers?
Yeah, no, we got to pay bills. We're salaried employees. It looks pretty in pictures, but trust me, it is hard, grueling work. Doing restoration is challenging. So if the romance has brought you into it, and the imagination of of a salary behind it, yeah, no, there's a lot of incredibly dedicated, passionate employees on our team and on other teams like Channel Islands Restoration, who work far more than any paycheck provides them on a daily basis. So yeah, no, we do get paid, and we're incredibly proud of what we do.
Yeah, you said it, absolutely. Susan Cherry asks, how do you eradicate a rat population? It's a mainland problem, she says. I'll just get in. One of the main things is it helps to have it when they're on islands because
yeah, well, if I could answer that question, I should probably be paid more.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll just read. I think this is just some facts that Andrew Walsh said. He said, "Hi, Chad. Love your work. By removing rats and mice from Lord Howe Island in Australia, we have seen snail species not seen for 100 years reappear, and the endangered wood hen recover from only 300 birds, total global population, with rodents in 2019 to 1,200 birds in 2022 without rodents, double explanation point."
Oh yeah, no, the work that Andrew and team did on Lord Howe was hard fought, and hats off to them. That is an inhabited island with some pretty unique circumstances, and so I think that's another one to keep an eye on as time ticks on. Hearing those results and the impact from that already, because that project didn't happen too long ago, and they fought hard for it too. So very cool. Great to hear from you, Andrew. Congratulations on the work. I won't stop saying that. Yeah, it's a proud moment to see those types of projects happen, and it's a precedent setter. So projects like Floriana take a lot away from people with the audacity to do those types of projects because they're serious, and there's oftentimes opposition in this type of work because it can be conflicting.
Yeah. Not everyone is sitting on the sidelines cheering on, or helping. I mean, in general, and that could be with plants. People don't want to eliminate, some invasive plants. They just don't. They call it playing God, but they forget that we played God in the first place by introducing these things.
Yeah, it's a weighing of intrinsic values, right? If the risk is losing a species off the face of the earth, it's not something that even we don't get up in the morning thinking, hey, let's go remove this species from the island. We get up in the morning thinking, hey, I wonder what's going to happen when we can save X, Y, and Z for generations to come, and for somebody else to see it, and for that ecosystem to remain intact. And if we had other tools and technology, like to the question earlier, with rodents, we don't want to be using rodenticide. We're looking at new technologies, species specific. We look at genetic work with a program like GBIRD, where rodenticides aren't even a part of the equation. So we're constantly trying to think, 2, 3, 1,000 steps ahead, and investing in those But at the same time, not giving up on the tools that we know work now, because if we don't do the work now, we're going to lose species. We're going to see extinctions like we have been, especially on islands, like I was mentioning before. So, saying I used to have on a computer, and I don't have it right now anymore. But it said, those who say it cannot be done shouldn't interrupt the people doing it. And so it's something to think about. We know there's important and hard decisions to make, and no matter how many people say it can't be done or it shouldn't be done, I think we're thankful for the results and the impact that we've been seeing out of that work. And at least from my perspective, I'm proud of the work over the past 20 years that I've been able to contribute to, and I know my colleagues and others out there are as well. It keeps us in the game.
Okay, I have one more question, but we'll entertain a couple more if somebody feels like typing some in. But we'll begin to wrap up here. Chris Larson asks, when I was on Guam, first he says, when I was on Guam, there was a difficult problem with invasive tree snakes.
Yeah.
Have you had any problem or any involvement with that?
We've got colleagues that are actively working on it. I've sat in a number of brainstorming sessions. So they're talking about the brown tree snake, which is a unique one. They're hermaphroditic. They're a reptile, which makes them, and they're very cryptic. So I've had minimal involvement. It's one of those where it comes up, we contribute as much as we can about trying to innovate and think about how to approach that. But definitely I'm not on the front lines like a lot of those other conservationists who are thinking about it day in and day out. That's a tough one, and it really needs a solution. And so another group, hats off to them for continuing to persevere on that front.
Fortunately, there's a wide diversity of groups out there, all bringing different kinds of strengths, and at other times, of course, working together. So it's really neat.
Yeah, we wouldn't be who we are without the partnerships that we have surrounding us. And so that, I think that's probably one of the most enriching pieces is, we work internationally, but where we go, we don't own any islands. Island conservation doesn't own land. We own the outcome as a part of our portfolio of success and impact. But the reality is it's often the local institutions, the local organizations, and the passionate people that own it and carry that forward. And so, great to hear you bring that up and mention that. Thank you.
Before I let you go, I can't help but putting in a little plug for Channel Islands Restoration. So we, of course, accept volunteers. We've got a lot going on. We'll be returning to regular island work, which kind of went away with the pandemic. But we will certainly be out there again. And we, of course, doing a lot on the mainland as well. It's April, so that means our mid-year fundraiser's coming up. And we do this work by, we really rely so much on individual contributions. It makes such a difference. We try to fund ourselves through contracts and doing work for people who then pay us for that work. And that does take us a long ways. But if it weren't for folks like who are attending the webinar tonight, and many of them are already donors, that's why I'm talking to you. And if you're not, get involved, but we'll be matching, let's see, $21,000 worth of donations, challenge donations that are coming up this May. So if we raise 21,000, we get 21,000. Anyway, I didn't want to scare everybody away, but on the other hand, by the time that I start thanking the guests, I notice everybody's going away. So thank you, Chad, so much. Chad Hansen, what a wonderful job. What a wonderful organization you work with. It's so neat to see the work that you've done. And that includes right in our own islands, but islands all over the world. Thank you so much. My gosh, we're impressed. All of us are. What a great job. Good for you. Keep it up.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for the time, everyone, tonight, and for staying up late with us.
Yeah. Thanks. Good night, everyone. And again, you can find this webinar repeated on our webpage. Look in the chat right now before we disconnect, and you'll see the link in there, but I'll say it as well. It's CIRWEB.org. Aunt Mindy, by the way, says, great job, Chad.
Look at that.
She stuck that one in.
Bag. My family knows what I do now. I just don't go on these endless vacations.
That's neat. I've never had an aunt come in and say, good job. That's very cool.
Thank you, Aunt Mindy.
But yeah, CIRWEB.org/webinars. You can also find it on our Facebook page and on our YouTube as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maury Spellman, our marketing director, for organizing and putting this together. And good night.
Wonderful. Take care, everyone.